Institute and the China Environment Forum, and we were chatting out in the hall whether Canadians or Chinese are more punctual in terms of our programs. We decided the Chinese programs, Environment Forum is much more punctual, so we compromised. Started just a few minutes late. Yeah, welcome. My name is Jennifer Turner, and I direct the China Environment Forum here. I'm in my 9th year. Woo! The program's been around for about 11 years, bringing together government, NGO, business, and researchers on issues of China energy, environment, and occasionally also food safety issues. What's intriguing today, I just realized as I was saying this, that I have government, NGO, and business people on the panel. We see that you guys are proof that and we're in the spirit of the Wilson Center. I mean, Canada Institute does the same, focusing on issues broadly in Canada, not simply environment. But we have done meetings with them before. Notably, about 18 months ago, we had a joint meeting on cooperation or competition of energy with China, the North American response. And if you can kind of vaguely remember, about 18 months ago, a long time ago in the news cycle. That was around the time when China going out into Africa and Latin America for oil and trying to buy one of our oil companies, Unicol, and everyone in DC was up in arms, and so we thought it was a good time to have kind of a calm voice to discuss this. And notably, the speakers at that talk all said cooperation, and so we're kind of back again with the whole Canada, U.S. working in China on energy theme. This time focusing on the issue of cooperation, and today looking not at federal government level cooperation with China, but looking at more local. Notably today we've got California government and Alberta government. And this actually kind of all came about. I need to acknowledge Barbara Finnemore, who directs the energy program in Natural Resources Defense Council, who's been long doing energy work in China. And she actually, with her colleague Boshan here, who directs their energy efficiency project, they created a partnership. I guess in some ways I called them the matchmaker between Jiangsu province and the state of California. And Boshan is going to be talking, and Commissioner Grunek are going to be talking about that aspect of the cooperation. And we also have Gary Marr. Well, I'm really botching up the whole intro here, but you guys have all the bios. But Gary Marr, he's official representative of the province of Alberta to the United States, and he's here in D.C., just came here not very long ago.
6 months. 6
months. Doesn't even have his children and furniture here, so it's kind of picture that image: a man with no furniture in D.C. But he served 14 years as a member of the Legislative Assembly in Alberta, and he's got like a whole bunch of ministerial titles with him hanging around his neck here. Notably, Minister of Environment, and has done a lot on. He co-chaired the Climate Change Central in Alberta, and actually that kind of links him with our other government speaker, Commissioner Grunek, who is the California Public Utilities Commissioner. She's been doing that since 2005, and also has been working. She's involved in Governor Schwarzenegger's climate action team. You can see lots of other things she's done. I mean, she's a recognized energy expert in the United States, and kind of what's exciting is she's been behind a lot of pushing the California cooperation with China on energy. To our other speaker, Wenran Zhang, who's actually going to be making more of commentary. He's kind of like anytime you email people say, I want to know something about Canada and China energy, everyone says, Wenran Zhang. The man, he's acting director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta, and he's advisor to all these different organizations of Canada Energy Council, Senior Fellow, Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Writes a lot of articles. I'm not even going to begin to list them. The only thing I've noticed, though, never written for me, Wenran. So publicly, encouraging him to write for me in the future. And maybe just a bit more on the first speaker, actually, Boshan. I mentioned he directs the energy efficiency project at NRDC, and he actually lived in the state. You're still officially living in the States, but from Beijing. He was a senior public utilities analyst for the Delaware Public Advocate Office, and both in his jobs in the States and also in China and the Chinese Academy of Sciences before. I mean, he's done a lot of work on regulatory issues related to electric restructuring, energy efficiency, renewable energy. So kind of the perfect energy guru to kind of be helping out, again, this matchmaking between Jiangsu and California. And I'm going to stop here because I really want to hear what they have to say. Been waiting a long time to hear about this kind of local-to-local cooperation. And I think I have to break the news to you. You guys ready? There's not a single PowerPoint in today's presentation. Can you handle that? We're going to get really old-fashioned here and actually have people talking directly with you, okay? So if you get sleepy, I guess go grab some more coffee or tea. And I'd like to ask Bolshan to begin talking, and you have the option of either speaking from your seat or coming to the podium, okay? And let's welcome our speakers. Yeah, this is fine. Just make sure you speak into the mic.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm so happy to see Commissioner Gornick, with whom we have been working very closely over the years in Jiangsu. And today I want to share with you some of our experience in Jiangsu and how to promote energy efficiency. Basically, how to use this local to local, try to start with local to address the global issue. And then I think also it's important starting with local in China is because, the China's central government sometimes have pay a lot of attention, emphasize on the energy efficiency, the pollution reduction. But when you go down to the local, it's very hard. It's the policy, the regulation is hard to go through. So that's why we really want to work bottom up from the local, start with local, so that the policy adopted at the central level can be implemented effectively. And I would like to just maybe first talk about something about Jiangsu. Where is Jiangsu? Something about Jiangsu, and then I would like to discuss how this California Jiangsu cooperation developed it over the years, and then I would like to see something about the problem Jiangsu is facing, and I would like to then discuss how the NRDC and California work together to address those problems. And finally, I want to talk about the outcome from this initiative. The achievement has been received for this initiative. So basically, as you know, Jiangsu is part of the southern part of China. It really is like in the Yangtze Delta region. River Delta region where the Shanghai is located. Basically, it's one of the most fast growing, most dynamic region in China. The population is like 76 million. For comparison, California have like a 36 million population. And when China overall economy has grown like 10% over the years, the last 5 years, the Jiangsu basically saw its GDP growing at double digit for 16 years. Any year is 16%, this double digit growing, and right now the province have like a per capita GDP is reaching $4,300 US dollar. That's one of the most developed region in China. And rapid economic growth is, of course, accompanied by the soaring electricity demand, with an average annual growth rate about 18% in the past 5 years. And 95% energy usage is the production is come from coal. 95% come from coal. Really, this is a province that really has a lot of problem with the pollution and the coal consumption. And for the electricity, the province consume about 295,000 gigawatt hour. For is a little bit more than California consumed. So you can see the level, the scale of the consumption. And then the Jiangsu the generation capacity reached 56 gigawatt. California peak demand for 2007 is 47 gigawatts. That's my number, maybe not accurate. The commissioner maybe have a better number, but it's about that ballpark. It really is a more capacity than California and consume more than California, but the population still like half the size of double the size of the California. And next I want to talk about how this California Jiangsu initiative developed it. Basically, the NRDC start to promote energy efficiency in China starting like 10 years ago. And we start with central government, but we feel sometimes is harder because whenever you have a policy, as I mentioned before, the local may have resistance from local. So this is why we try to go down below to go to the local to see how we can help them so that the central level policy can be adopted. And then at that time, when we go to, because the Jiangsu is the target, because it's the rapid economic growth. So we talk with Jiangsu, and at that time, the Jiangsu people have no interest. Why? Because they have a surplus, the power surplus. They said, no, don't worry, go back. We don't have any interest. Then we didn't give up. We tried, and we whenever we have a conference, a seminar, we invite Jiangsu people come over. So we tried, and starting 2003, the country, the China, facing the energy shortage because of the economic growth. And then the Jiangsu, of course, is without the exception, and they have a very big shortage. And then so, and also is that true that in the past there is a low the DSM has been used in China, but mainly is for load control, and unfortunately the China situation is quite different than the U.S. because in China they have a very high average load factor on China grid. It's like 80 to 90%. So basically when you see the load curve is flat, almost flat. 80-90% of the time is peak. So that is that's different than the U.S. U.S. is like 55 to 65% U.S. So that means the load control really cannot make a lot of sense because if you do continue to the load control will be hurt economy. So basically, the Jiangsu really have like a dead end. They didn't know what's the best way to do the thing. So basically, come to us and then ask help to really try to address using the energy efficiency to reduce both peak demand and long-term energy consumption. So basically, organized by the NRDC, the California regulator, the public utility regulator, energy commissioner, visited China in 2005. And basically, because Jiangsu want to learn how California managed to keep their per capita energy consumption flat when grow economy by 40% over the last decades. So they want to learn how. And then so arranged by RDC, the California regulator official visit China, visit Nanjing, and there they signed the cooperation agreement to help Jiangsu to reduce its dependency on coal-fired power plant through exchange expertise, sharing best practice, and developing regulatory mechanism. Since then, two sides have conducted extensive exchange on energy efficiency and DSM through training, study tour, technology seminars, and technical support for energy efficiency projects. And in that MOU, the Annex 1 specified that NRDC and the Jiangsu DSM Center as the two implementation agency to do this implementation. And so basically this MOU, this cooperation agreement is the first in its kind in China, as it was the first governmental cooperation on energy efficiency that involved international NGO, and also is like the first one in writing to make the government make commitment, the professional government make commitment on promoting energy efficiency. So, and before I go into a little bit deep detail about what we have been doing with California to promote energy efficiency in Jiangsu to implement this MOU, maybe I just want to highlight some problem Jiangsu is facing, and we experienced during our work with them. So basically, in China and also in Jiangsu, there is something like they haven't treated the energy efficiency as a resources. They just treat it as a tool, load management tool, or try to do some short-term solution. They didn't really to treat DSM or energy efficiency as a resource, energy resource. And also there is the lack of administrative structure, institutional structure in China in doing energy efficiency. Now the government right now try to figure out what the best way to do it, to manage the energy efficiency, to institutionalize energy efficiency. Is that either a utility doing that, or the government doing that, or a third party doing that? So they still try to figure out what the best model. And also they have a split incentive problem, like the owner, for the factory, for the manager, they don't care about energy efficiency because they only have a 3-term, 5-year term. They leave. So why I invest in energy efficiency? Let my the person replace me to benefit from energy efficiency. So they don't have an interest doing that. So there is a split incentive problem there. And also there is a lack of awareness and the focus. I mean, basically, the more you look at the facility, the more you find the problem. So that's exactly what will happen in the audit, energy audit. And also they have a limited information, a lack of information on cost, on energy consumption, on energy saving options. So they don't have much information available. And also the very high opportunity cost. The audit we went through, we feel that the facility manager they have their mind on something else. They said we have money, but we want to invest new production, we want to invest new venture, whatever. So they feel energy efficiency is not their priority because it's the high opportunity cost. And also they have a limited capital access. They don't have a financing option, much financing option. They don't have a capital available for investing in energy efficiency. And also the lack of reliable access to high efficiency technology due to the low volume because they don't do a bulk purchase. So their cost, economic scale is small, so they involve higher unit cost, and the price is also high. And also, there's a lack of a trusted service provider. We don't have a very mature ASCO market in China, and the facility normally they don't trust on the smaller the provider. Saying, why I use you? I mean, well, how I can trust you? So there's a bunch of problem. Really, we need to address if you want to have a successful the implementation in Jiangsu. So basically, based on those problems, we been working with California, and we support strongly by the Commissioner Gronek and her staff and Energy Commission staff. We have been very fortunate. We get strong support from California. And we're working with them to first develop a strategic blueprint for the energy efficiency for the province. We look at the picture like beyond right now, up to 2015. And if implemented this strategic blueprint by 2015, the annual electricity saving could be reached at 42,000 gigawatt hour, equivalent to electricity supplied by 26 large coal-fired plants. So that's really a significant saving. And so right now we help them to bring increase the economic scale by we initiate working with California to initiate what we call an efficient power plant. And this is a new idea. It's something like the idea is that we treat energy efficiency as, because China really interested in production, the power plant. They like the term power plant. So in order to build more plant, we say, okay, we can save more energy, but we still use power plant name. So we call an efficient power plant, means we sell your megawatt, not a megawatt, but megawatt. So we combine, basically we work with California, combine all the smaller projects together, bundle them together to make that a bigger project, so that you can have this as an economic scale and bring down the cost and have easy to talk with supplier, provider, whatever. So make the more energy efficiency more successful. So in the past 2 years, California, the Jiangsu has initiated like 30 megawatt 30 megawatt capacity of this efficient power plant, and save a lot of energy. And so basically, based on the blueprint, if implemented at larger scale, so the efficient power plant could reach 300 megawatt, reducing coal consumption by 21 million tons, and that could meet 10% of Jiangsu's projected electric growth and 15% of peak demand growth by 2015. By 2015. So that's basically that's work we have been working with California in Jiangsu, and also we organized the first DSM national DSM forum to promote DSM as a valuable, cost-effective energy resource. And we also help work with California to develop a different administrative model to institutionalize energy efficiency. Help them to present them some model in the U.S. like California utility-based model. New York is a quasi-government the model, and Vermont using some like a third-party independent model. So we try to introduce them different variety option, and also we introduce some like different in other countries, other developing countries, how they do manage their energy efficiency. So we give them all the options, and that right now we work with them, try to develop a model that's suitable for China, for Jiangsu. And we also producing the national DSM implementation manual that to standardize the procedure. Because when you do energy efficiency, always don't know how to do in a right way. So basically, we developed this manual so that help them to standardize the procedure, and especially for the monitoring, verification of the energy saving result. And also, we work with California to help the government, Jiangsu government, to design incentive to solve the split incentive problem. And right now, the Jiangsu is earmark 100 million Chinese yuan each year to just do energy efficiency. So that's really the incentive program right now kick off. And we also conducting work with the California utility to conducting a comprehensive energy audit to raise awareness and help factory to focus. And we're organizing a study tour and technical training to build capacity. We bring last year we bring a group of high-level officials to California to meet with CPUC and the Energy Commission, meet with officials, experts, and to learn with each other, to learn how the California really do their success, get their success. And we also established China-U.S. Energy Efficiency Alliance to share information and the best practice. And the alliance is very very active in promoting energy efficiency, technology, sharing information, and work closely with. Basically, the alliance is supported by the California, and is the two major California utility as the founding member of the alliance. And we also helping the Jiangsu really try to developing effective financing option through leveraging government incentive. Right now they have a government incentive, but 100 million yuan. So how you maximize that potential? We are thinking about maybe we can do that differently, not just give direct cash. Maybe we can do using that as seed money to get involving fund, or do some like attract more funding from other agency like the multinational agency like Asian Development Bank, World Bank, and just using this government incentive as guarantee, a loan guarantee or risk sharing or buy down interest. So you have all kind of different options. So we try to working with California to explore all those different options, see what best suitable for Jiangsu. And we also are developing method to incorporate ESCO as the delivery mechanism, try to create a market in Jiangsu.
You can tell people what an ESCO is.
ESCO is the energy service company. We shortly brief as ESCO company. So basically, we have been working with California for several years in doing all kind of activities, and right now, basically, finally, I want to highlight some outcome from this California Jiangsu initiative. And so basically, in the last 4 years, the Jiangsu has raised a total of 240 million Chinese yuan to support energy efficiency. This is the repair-funded incentive money fund for the incentive fund. And they formed a 30 megawatt the efficient power plant so far, and reducing 580 megawatt peak load, and have brought approximately 2 million 20 billion yuan of benefit for the Jiangsu business, reduced 92 million ton of CO2 emission and 1.8 million ton of SO2 emission. And this is the only province. Everybody maybe as you know, the China 2 years ago initiated they call the ambitious energy intensity reduction goal, which is reduce the country's energy intensity by 20% by year 2010. So this is a very ambitious goal. And first year is only 1 some percent, and last year I heard it's 3 point something. So it's still below the goal. And if you reach the goal 20%, that means within 5 years, that means each year you have to reduce 4% at least. But Jiangsu, because of this ambitious activity in Jiangsu, aggressive activity in Jiangsu, Jiangsu is the first province last year to reach 4.3% reduction. So that's the only province reached that goal after Beijing. This success and achievement has been highly praised by the Premier Minister and the Jiangsu California Corporation, and has been recommended by the State Council as a national model. So that right now it's really we work with the California really to bring some really see the fruit, bring the result to the ground, and we're really happy to see that Jiangsu has been right now adopted as the national model. With that, I thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you. By the way, I'm sorry, and then follow. Then I think the Commissioner Gronek can highlight the next step for our work. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, and just to remind folks out there that you hear so many negative things about China with their coal and energy, and isn't it nice to hear a good story? And it will continue.
Thanks. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. Let me just give a quick overview of how we're thinking about and approaching energy efficiency in California, and then, as Bo said, follow up a bit with what we're looking at as the next steps. In California, we take energy efficiency, we hope, very, very seriously. We have in our state law that all cost-effective energy efficiency shall be pursued, and we have adopted as formal energy policy in California that energy efficiency is what we call number one in our loading order. And what that means is that we pursue energy efficiency first, then renewables, and then clean fossil-fired fuel. And so we're trying to be very, very clear that this is the resource of choice. It makes sense economically, it makes sense from a viewpoint of reliability, and it certainly makes sense in terms of global warming. That we also have in California our new law, AB 32, which requires that California by the year 2020 have our emissions of greenhouse gases reduced down to 1990 levels, and those must be reduced regardless of population growth. And furthermore, they must take into account any imports of power from out of state that serve California residents or businesses. We are running what we think is the world's largest energy efficiency program, but we would be delighted to be overshadowed by China. It is a healthy competition. Currently, the investor-owned utilities, which my agency oversees and regulates, they're providing about 90% of the energy efficiency savings in California. And we are spending about $1 billion a year in California on energy efficiency programs that my agency oversees that the investor-owned utilities implement. That's $1 billion a year. Our rule of thumb is that for every dollar spent on energy efficiency, we're saving $2 in avoided more expensive generation or transmission or distribution supplies. So we often think of this as one of the largest economic development programs that we have going. That we're basically saving $2 billion a year. $1 billion is paying for the cost of the energy efficiency, but $1 billion is staying within the California economy. And that is the story that we're trying to tell China. It's a win-win solution. You get to keep that money. You get to keep it to grow your economy. And we also, as Bo mentioned, we have very good records that show over a 30-year period with our aggressive energy efficiency through building standards, appliance standards, utility programs, that we have been able to keep our per capita consumption of energy flat. And over that same 30-year period that we've been doing energy efficiency in California, our economic growth has risen by 79%. Which is certainly comparable to the rest of the United States, but unfortunately we haven't seen that aggressive energy efficiency in the rest of the United States. And so they basically, from our viewpoint, have in many ways been not growing their economy as much as they could be. We're certainly seeing a lot of change at many of the other states. So let me just move on to, with that background, as many of you may know, with our current governor, Governor Schwarzenegger, he very, very much believes we must absolutely reach out to the rest of the world, that the failure to have a good, solid national energy policy in the United States, the failure of the federal government to address climate change effectively, is not something that we can just sit back and ignore. And so we talk about we've become the nation state of California. I think we have an agreement with Alberta. We have an agreement with many countries around the world now, many states to cooperate. And so the Jiangsu MOU was actually one of the first agreements, if not the first agreement, but we have many more now. And it basically, the concept is, we certainly don't have all the answers in California. We went through our energy crisis. We've made many mistakes, but we do think in the area of energy efficiency, we have a good story to tell. We have a lot of technical expertise. We have a lot of policy expertise. And we are never, ever going to solve the tremendous problems and difficulties we face with global warming unless we have energy efficiency as the foundation, the centerpiece of strategies on climate change. So with that background in mind, at the state level in California, there was very strong support when NRDC approached us to say, would you enter into the MOU and start doing an exchange of information, start building relationships with China. I had the opportunity to go to China about 6 weeks ago now with a Commissioner, Art Rosenfeld, from my fellow energy agency, the Energy Commission. FERC Commissioner John Wellinghoff went, as well as a couple of commissioners from other states, and we did a 2-week trip to China, Beijing, Shanghai, then to Jiangsu province to meet with the officials there. And it was, for me, very, very good to see firsthand the seriousness and the commitment that the officials were taking at the highest level of Jiangsu province. Really saying we are committed to figuring out how to do energy efficiency. And I will say, not just in that meeting, but in all of the meetings, there is a seriousness that China is taking energy efficiency. And I just wanted to emphasize that certainly all of us are aware that China is building a coal plant a week, the tremendous environmental problems that are going on, but I came away from the trip really understanding that at many levels in China, there is an understanding of both the seriousness of the environmental problems, including global warming, the understanding that energy efficiency is a strategy that makes sense, and really saying, now how do we make that work in China? That we have special circumstances. Bo did a great job of listing some of the special issues that both the ones that we face overall when we're thinking of energy efficiency, but ones unique to China. And so on many, many levels, now the discussion is about how can we ramp up the capability in China to do energy efficiency? How can we tailor it to really meet our needs? So part of the discussion that we had in Jiangsu province, and now we're having back in our respective activities, are what are the next steps? And again, you heard a little bit on what we may be doing, but the ones that we're looking at in particular are that certainly assisting on the development of this DSM, the National DSM Manual for China. And what's interesting to me is that now in California, we're starting to have discussions with various levels of the government in India, who's also looking at doing energy efficiency. And so one of the concepts that we've come up with is that since there has been this extensive work in the last year and a half on the National DSM Manual for China, instead of just starting from scratch on thinking about how we in California can be assisting India, why don't we take that product, certainly it would be tailored, but use it as a foundation. So that's another point that I wanted to make, is that for all of us, as we're looking at ways to be assisting the developing world, and particularly China as well as India, on thinking about climate change, thinking about energy issues, it makes sense to think about how can we leverage one activity off of the other. So right up at the top is getting the National DSM Manual finalized, making it available. It will certainly be on our website, on the U.S.-China Energy Efficiency website, but on various ways that it can be accessed. We are also looking at starting to think about climate change in particular. That you may have heard that on Earth Day, the head of the California Environmental Protection Agency, Linda Adams, was in China, and she did sign an agreement, a memorandum of understanding between the United Nations Development Program and the state of California. It is available on the website of the California EPA, and I think there's a link from our website as well. But this, I think, is one of the first commitments that we have seen, again, trying to take it not just in energy, but having an exchange of information on ways to be addressing climate change. So we're looking at, through our agreement with the Jiangsu province, of working on developing a methodology that would take the energy efficiency savings and be converting it into recognized savings from greenhouse gas emissions. That this is not just a given, that it is an accepted, recognized methodology, so that you really can say, when we're talking about the energy savings, here are the comparable tons of avoided emissions. And because we're having to do that in California now as part of our own global warming law, one of the things that we think we could be working on quite effectively with China is that they can then start to understand the methodologies we're using, understanding where they may want to make some modifications, but starting to build the expertise internally within China of how will you start to track avoided emissions from climate change, because in many ways that will become the name of the game, how you can translate it into the greenhouse gas emission reductions. We are are also doing a few things in California that we think will be transferable over to China. For example, we are planning on adopting later this year a strategic plan on energy efficiency for California. As I said, when you're looking at the amount of money that we're spending, which is translating into about 500 megawatts of avoided generation every single year, we realized that we needed to have a plan of where we're going with all that money, with all that activity. And specifically where we're looking at in terms of going with increased building standards, with appliance standards, but equally important, how we're trying to transform the marketplace itself and behavior. So we have been in the process for about 9 months with, we've had over 40 meetings and workshops to develop a very detailed strategic plan on energy efficiency for the state of California. We have a website if you want to be following it, californiaenergyefficiency.com. And what we discussed with the Chinese officials in Jiangsu was that when we have this plan available, obviously it's going to be on the website and can be accessed anywhere in the world. But if they wanted to, that we could undertake to translate into Mandarin specific chapters, the industrial chapter, maybe the codes and standards chapter. And I think that there was a lot of interest in that. We're also in the process of setting up a major web portal on energy efficiency. And again, we talked about working with them from the beginning so that it will have the type of information that will be useful for China that we have in California because of our extensive energy efficiency efforts. Probably the largest amount of technical know-how and information on energy efficiency. We have a database that has over 2,000 measures, very specific items, basically every type of light fixture you could imagine and what's its cost and what's its savings. And then we have detailed studies on measurement and verification. We have 30 years of policies and decisions. And we want to make that information available. It doesn't do a lot of good sitting in California. And so we're working with many other states in California, many other states in the United States, the national government here, but we're starting to figure out how can we make it available internationally. And again, Jiangsu province and those officials will be great about giving us feedback of what information, how to post it, how to have interactive discussions online will really, really help a lot. So I think with that, I'll probably close that we have many other ideas that are going on that I'll just end with. One of them is that we have adopted as a formal goal in California getting to what we call zero net energy building, which is basically the buildings that are being built now on average in the United States are consuming anywhere between 30 to 50% more energy in their usage than you need to just using known technology. And in China, the buildings that are being built on average are about 30% less efficient than the average buildings being built elsewhere. So there is a tremendous opportunity to improve buildings in China just using existing technology. And there's also a tremendous opportunity in California and in the rest of the world. And this matters because half of the new buildings being built in the world, each and every year are being built in China. Every year, China is building 1/3 the amount of the total commercial space in the United States. The buildings are gorgeous. I mean, they're just they're unsurpassed. And at the very top tier, they're now the equivalent of LEED, which is the standard for green building. They're international competitions, but the vast, vast majority of buildings in China are way below what can be done. So getting back to California, we now have as a formal goal for California that our new homes by 2020 will be zero net energy. And we picked that up because when I went on a trip to the UK last summer, I found out that the UK has their goal of getting to residential homes by 2016. So we've added a little bit more time. And then for our commercial buildings to have them be zero net energy by 2030, which is part of an international effort. So as we in a major decision that we're doing in California this fall, we will be putting in place the plan as well as the dollars to really start on this effort, to think out where your building standards need to go, where you're working with the private sector, so that we can really have a plan to get ourselves to zero net energy. And this is something where we're going to be working as closely as we can with China, at least having them understand the steps we're taking, exchanging whatever technical or policy information we can, so that it's something that's not just affecting California, because while that's great, our actual new buildings are not that significant. But that it can leapfrog over into China, and with the cooperation and help of NRDC, our own utilities, as well as others, really trying to make a difference there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, buildings will be key. I mean, one other stat just overwhelmed me is that the actual making the construction materials, building them, and running China's buildings uses 45% of their energy. So, all right, let's move to Canada, Alberta. Also somewhat progressive on energy. Come up here.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thanks so much for having me here today, Jennifer. On behalf of the government of Alberta, I'm very, very pleased to be with all of you today in this distinguished panel of guests. I want to tell you that Alberta has been at the forefront of Canada-China relations since the 1960s, when Alberta grain shipments first formed the basis of our relationship with China. And since then, our relationship has grown and become stronger and stronger. China is now Alberta's second largest trading partner, behind only the United States. And in the last 5 years, our exports to China have more than doubled. So right now, there are more than 20 Alberta companies that currently participate in China, and we expect that number to continue to grow. So I'm often asked, as Jennifer did ask me, what has Alberta done to facilitate greater cooperation and investment and trade with China? And that's what, of course, we're here to talk about today, governments working together. In 1989, the Alberta government entered into a joint venture with the China National Petroleum Corporation, and in that year, 1989, established by the then Premier of the province, what was created was the CNPC, Alberta Joint Petroleum Center. And this center promotes environmental sciences and technology development and the transfer of information and research and technology between our two jurisdictions. In 2006, the center facilitated a delegation from PetroChina to visit the province of Alberta to learn about our CO2 enhanced recovery projects. And I'll be happy to answer some of the detailed types of questions that you might have about what EOR is. But without question, the center was one of the catalysts that led to even greater cooperation between our province of Alberta and China. In 1999, Alberta opened up an office in Beijing, and that office promotes trade and investment opportunities. It works to create a business environment for both big and small enterprises alike, and seeks cooperation with government and businesses to maximize Alberta's opportunities. The focus of that Beijing office places on trade and investment builds on a strong history of political collaboration between our jurisdictions. Alberta twinned with the northeastern province of Heilongjiang in 1981. Our province's capital city, Edmonton, is twinned with the city of Harbin, which is the capital of Heilongjiang. The city of Calgary, my hometown, is Alberta's major commercial city and the center of the Canadian oil and gas business, and it is twinned with Dajing, which is also in Heilongjiang province. In 2005, the then Premier of Alberta, Premier Klein, signed an agreement with China's Ministry of Science and Technology and the Heilongjiang Department of Science and Technology to encourage scientific and technological cooperation and research exchange. So I say all of that to you to conclude that Alberta and China have, in fact, a very solid foundation of mutual cooperation between the jurisdictions. And that cooperation has led to joint environmental initiatives. Alberta has successfully completed the development of China's coal bed methane technology, CO2 sequestration project, and that project is designed to promote environmentally sustainable development in China. The City of Edmonton is currently cooperating with the City of Chengdu to demonstrate Alberta's environmental expertise in the area of waste management. A private sector company, Calgary-based Questar Technologies, providing both the technology and the equipment to Sinopec for their sour gas field to reduce their waste gas emissions. So I want to make it very clear that Alberta is open to sharing our knowledge, our technology with China and the rest of the world. And of course, as Commissioner Gurevich said, also to learn from them as well. And these examples show that Alberta has indeed a great deal to give when it comes to sharing our environmental expertise. We have some unique challenges for which we welcome international advice, expertise, and technology. But we recognize environmental responsibility will be even more critical as the international spotlight shines on Alberta's vast energy resources. So let me give you some sense of what the magnitude of those resources are. Alberta's oil sands constitute the second largest proven oil reserve in the world, second only to Saudi Arabia. Many Americans will not be able to identify where their energy comes from. If you ask people, where does your oil, where does your natural gas come from, they might identify Saudi Arabia or perhaps Venezuela or perhaps the Middle East in general. But in fact, it is Canada. And the majority of it comes from the province of Alberta, oil and natural gas. We are the largest exporters of energy into the U.S. And this large proven oil reserve is the largest one outside of the control of OPEC, and it is a growing source of investment in the province of Alberta. In fact, there's some $20 billion that is forecast to be invested in the oil sands this year. To put that in perspective, that is greater than the rest of Canada's entire manufacturing sector combined. This massive investment underlines the growing importance of Alberta's oil sands, not just to the province of Alberta's economy, but also to Canada's economic health. But in Alberta, we fully recognize it is not an economy versus environment showdown. We must show leadership on both fronts. If I were to use an example of a Venn diagram and have a sphere of economic security and a sphere of environmental security, the purpose of our public policy and our legislation that drives it in the province of Alberta is to try and bring those two spheres closer together so that there's a much greater overlap between them than is currently the case. So we are committed to developing our energy in an environmentally responsible manner. We know that Alberta energy must be clean energy. It must be developed as cleanly as possible. It must use the best technologies that are available. This is not only expected of Albertans, of their government, but it's also expected by our customers. Now, much has been said about the oil sands and climate change. Currently, Alberta's oil sands account for about 4% of Canada's overall greenhouse gas emissions. And Canada is responsible for about 2% of global emissions. So to put that in perspective, Alberta's oil sands contribute about 0.1% of the world's emissions while producing 1.5% of the world's oil. Furthermore, because of ongoing investment in oil sands, we are on track to becoming one of the top 5 oil producers in the entire world. While output is growing, oil sands projects have reduced their carbon dioxide emissions intensity by 45% since 1990, and we're working to reduce it even further than that. Last year, our government became the first jurisdiction in North America to legislate greenhouse gas emissions for large emitters. Preliminary results for the first year indicate that companies in fact made real reductions of 2.6 million tons through operational changes and practices, including better use and reuse of energy, and investing in verified offsets created by other Alberta projects. So that reduction is equivalent to taking 550,000 vehicles off the road in a year. Companies who did not make the 12% reductions that were required in real emissions paid the equivalent of $15 per ton. And the result of that was that companies paid in total approximately $40 million into the Climate Change and Emissions Management Fund. The purpose of that fund is to take that money and invest it in projects and technologies that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the province. Alberta's 2008 climate change strategy ensures environmental protection while maintaining Albertans' quality of life and continuing economic growth. Carbon capture and storage will reduce our emissions 70% by the year 2050. The bulk of these reductions will come from activities related to oil sands productions. By 2050, under the plan, we will have reduced projected emissions by 200 megatons, the equivalent of taking 42 million cars off of the road. To explore this potential, our current Premier, the Honourable Ed Stelmach, has launched a council that will develop a roadmap for implementing carbon capture and storage. And I can tell you that I recently attended a CCS conference, the world's largest CCS conference, I believe, in Pittsburgh, when it comes to technology, the geology, public policy. In these three areas, Alberta has much that others have learned from, and we have taken the very best of practices in other jurisdictions and employed them in our province as well. Now, you might be wondering why I'm going into this kind of detail as it may relate to CCS. And permit me, if you will, to go back to the time in 1999 when I was the Minister of Environment for the province of Alberta. And I was at the Bonn round of negotiations for the Kyoto Protocol in Bonn, Germany. And what I distinctly heard from both the Chinese and the Indian delegates at that conference was that they pointed to Western developed countries and said, you developed your standard of living and your economies based on a carbon-based technology, and it is our intention to do exactly the same thing. Now, I say that to you because I think it's important to know that we believe in Alberta that we all in this world live under one atmosphere. And so that is the reason why Alberta is 100% committed to using technology to develop our energy resource responsibly, and that we believe that expertise can be shared with China in its quest for economic growth and prosperity for its citizens, will require also responsible development and consumption of increased amounts of energy. The world-class expertise and technology that we're dedicated to developing in CCS, in carbon capture and sequestration, is one example where our success may be of great mutual benefit to all. We also understand the importance of working with China to push the envelope in developing cleaner energy. We are committed to doing that. But it is clear, of course, that all provinces, all countries, all jurisdictions will have to work together, and each of us will have to contribute to ensure that we have the cleanest planet possible. Alberta recognizes the importance of leveraging our long-standing history of economic cooperation with China and transitioning that into greater environmental cooperation. So with that, I'll conclude, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Yep, I'm just here. Yep.
Okay, and I think that following up, I think you'll be able to take his comments and link it to the broader looking at Canada-China energy cooperation that's existed, right?
Yeah. I will be brief so we can open up the floor for some discussion. I'm pretty sure our very intelligent audience will have a lot of questions. Rather than having me laboring over what's being presented, I think I'll just present a few points of observations. But first, thank you very much, Jennifer, for always putting up such very important forums, and always enjoy coming to join you. I just came back last Friday from China after some 10 days of a trip. And of course, in the last few days, when I was in Beijing, in Nanjing, and then go to Beijing, it was an earthquake that occurred, the intensity of the response now, we have all probably witnessed, it's just only emerging. One thing coming into my mind in the past few days, very busy observing this, as probably many of you have done, and talking to the media, and I'm a political scientist in background, and trying to make sense of what it really means for China and for the rest of the world. One important thing that comes into my mind in discussing with many of the Chinese colleagues and also the observers of China is just intensity of outpouring of support for the earthquake victims. And there is some kind of national awakening, and I've called it shock of consciousness for people. And I think one larger issue related to the theme of today's talk and discussion is that I think eventually this current form of national mobilization will lead to reflections and discussions and debates about China's development paradigm. That is, as some of our previous speakers have said, China has been able to build some of the most remarkable skyscrapers in the world, in the most advanced cities that we see in Beijing and Shanghai. And yet, in the vast majority of Chinese remote and western part of the country, the standard is very low. Per capita income very low. You have a widening gap between rich and poor, widening gap between the urban and rural areas, and you have so-called tofu structures that scramble like this during the earthquakes. Many school children buried and crushed to death, and these are really resonate with a lot of people's feelings. I think the questions will be asked: what happened to the building codes that's supposed to stand for 8.0 earthquake in the exactly earthquake zone areas? I think that will lead to a national discussion of the development model China has pursued in the past. And I think that in that discussion, that broader macro level reflections definitely coming would be a part of China that has to move beyond the traditional development paradigm of high resource input, labor-intensive, energy-intensive kind of model, that moving beyond that and to pursue a more balanced approach of development. And in that, I think energy efficiency, green GDP, and a better way of a balanced development in managing the economy, environmentally friendly kind of development model would definitely emerge in this debate. At least that's my hope. And so therefore I think it's relevant for this event to what we're talking about. I think it will be more receptive by the Chinese for the foreign cooperations. As you can see, this is for the first time that they have accepted foreign rescue teams, as limited as they are, 4 or 5 countries only. And then they're accepting many and calling in many foreign medical teams. I think that's in line with a more opening China in accepting international cooperation. I think that it will spread into other spheres and probably enhance the cooperation, the larger macro level prospect of the energy and efficiency cooperation between China and the rest of the world. That being said, let me come back to the very topic of what we've been discussing. I think the local level, that is the state to province from the United States and province to province from Canada with China, this set of relationship is still very new, at a very earlier stage of development. And Jennifer and I and Gary and others who've been discussing about putting this panel together, we've been looking, like, what are there we're seeing between the state and provinces of North America with China's local cities and provinces? Yes, there are a lot of twinning. There are a lot of sister provinces, a lot of sister cities. It's been developing in decades. But to what extent those twinning relationships actually developed into the area of energy efficiency, environmental kind of cooperation. That's, I think, is still at a very earlier stage. Today, what we see in the California case and the Alberta case is quite amazing. But it's really not representative of a larger phenomenon of massive twinning up. So then the other side of the coin is that there's huge potential for local level, provincial, city level cooperation, and in somehow transforming the twinning relationship, some of those in existence for a long time, into some kind of a new direction along the energy efficiency and environmental cooperation. That's the first point. The second one is I want to mention that I've been serving as a special advisor on China for the Energy Council, which is based in Texas. It represents 11 U.S. Oil energy producing states. All the major oil producing states are in this council, and 5 Canadian provinces of energy producing provinces, plus the nation of Venezuela. Of course, it joined the Energy Council a while back, but in recent years, because of Chavez and the hostilities between the United States and Venezuela, it dropped out a little bit. But in the past year also, it is coming back again. The Energy Council is a state level and provincial level legislatures group. We're looking at senators, representatives at state level. They normally serve as chairs and other kind of capacities of the state level legislature on energy and environment. Also, the Minister of Energy of each Canadian province and a MLA representing the Canadian provinces in the Energy Council. What I think prompted the Energy Council at the state and provincial level interest in China, I think it was after the fall of 2005, when the Chinese company Sinopec trying to purchase Unicom, and it failed, and primarily was politically blocked by the United States Congress at federal level. And the voice that we heard from the Energy Council, which is a provincial and state level legislatures group, and saying, we do not share those views of confrontation. We wanted to do something with China that's more cooperative. We want to solve problems of energy security and environmental issues with China, because the Energy Council has a large environmental efficiency component to it in their state level legislation process. Because the Energy Council's origin was actually back in early 1990s when they formed, and then Alberta is the first Canadian province was to be invited to join this group. At that time, it was actually there were problems between Canada and the United States over energy. Believe it or not, it was quite a lot of problems, jurisdiction, market, and all that. And now we know it really worked out quite well through dialogue rather than confrontation. And that's the origin of this Energy Council that has many Canadian provinces continuing to join the Energy Council. So they wanted to adopt a similar model in approaching North America-China cooperation on the energy and the environmental front. Rather than saying we fight for energy, we exclude each other, how about we try to include each other? And rather than fighting about global warming, emission targets and all that, and the state level approaches and provincial level approaches to talk with the Chinese. So in the past few years, we see this interesting development, still young, and 2 years ago that I led the core of the 4 or 5 senators and representatives to China to meet with the Chinese leadership and National Development and Reform Commission and top oil and energy companies talking about a range of issues. And interestingly, we found out that the U.S. federal government's representation in Beijing, the Department of Energy, is primarily focusing on their presence is primarily on nuclear energy. Actually, its setup is to try to commercialize and selling nuclear technologies and promote that in China. So there's a lot of room. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of room for state level and provincial level cooperation with China. And last summer, a 49-member delegation representing all the 11 U.S. states and 3 out of 5 Canadian provinces has a large delegation that I arranged them to go to China, has a 3-day visit and meeting with Chinese officials again. Majority of these senators, representatives, MLAs, ministers are first time to China, quite amazingly. And that means really there's so much room for the North American provincial and state level as actors in engaging with Chinese locals. And one of the agendas is how maybe we can twin up through not only legislative process, but also through government of the state and provincial levels and to help China to meet its targets. So these are the kind of momentums you put together what I call as emerging subnational actors in engaging China on energy and environmental related front, which is also quite a new phenomenon. And so that's the kind of traditional model is always federal government versus the central Chinese government. But now we see in the past few years, as demonstrated by Alberta and California, but also by the Energy Council, they have this tremendous interest and drive to somehow going beyond the federal government engagement to take initiatives at the local level, provincial, state level. I think that's a very important step. And if we could, maybe in the future we should further look at this as a policy agenda, as a research direction in some ways, and promote that. I think it's good to go beyond the federal level, especially considering in the Canadian case at least, in the past 2.5 years, the federal government has not been super friendly, if friendly at all, towards China. I guess Mr. Gary Marr is not at liberty to say much of the federal politics, but I'm just an independent academic and can say they're not really interested in engaging China at all, at any level. And so they don't seem to care that much. It is more important, I think, when the federal climate, at least in the Canadian context, is so negative, how we can actually push the agenda still beyond the federal politics and move things forward, at least in the western provinces of Canada. I know it's in the States, it's the same situation that we could move the agenda by going beyond the only federal level, but going to look at the local and subnational level actors. So is the case in relation to this, is this organization called PANWAR, Pacific Northwest Economic Region. They represent 5 U.S. states and 3 Canadian provinces at the Northwest Economic Region, Washington State and all that. They've been also very actively trying to engage China, especially on the environmental front. British Columbia, Washington State, and the Alberta, very active in this area. I don't think they have been very successful in whole institutionalized engagement as a region, PANWAR as a region yet, but they're making efforts, and I've been involved with them as I have been involved with the Energy Council in making those linkages. So that's the second point I'm trying to make, that there are potentials from the subnational actors as emerging, which is still quite powerful, and it could have a good future. The last point, the third observation, is really, I see there's still quite a lot of challenges in such a engagement, local to local. One of the challenges, I think, is the issue of perception. How efficient we are as North Americans. What kind of lifestyle that we live. When we try to go to China to convince them that they should live a more energy efficient and more environmentally friendly life. And they look at the statistics, they look at the per capita energy consumption rate, and they say, I'm sorry, don't come here and lecture us. So that actually is important because China at the moment, they're not saying they don't want to cooperate with the advanced industrialized countries. They do a lot with Europe. They do a lot with Japan. And they have identified, the NDRC, National Development and Reform Commission, by far has identified Japan as the #1 cooperating partner among all the advanced industrialized countries on environmental issues and energy efficiency issues. They simply concluded that Japan has done much better than the rest. Yeah. And there's no doubt about it. We have to acknowledge that. So in that sense, we are lagging behind in North America in comparison with Japan, with Western European countries. We need to do better. And I think we need to convince the Chinese, local or central government, that we need to do something more in reducing our own carbon footprint, in increasing our environmentally friendly way of life, and probably addressing the overall issue of lifestyle in a more and more environmentally challenging world. I think that's the bigger picture challenge. Second is really the challenge is how to convince the Chinese, actually the local actors matter. The NGOs matter, provincial government, state government really matter. We've been trying to convince and tell Chinese every year. I've been organizing as a part of the federal government's initiative in engaging China in Canada, that since 2004, we've organized an annual Canada-China energy and environmental dialogue. Every time we say we emphasize on provincial actors. Last year we have many U.S. states coming. It's becoming more and more of a North American state level, provincial level dialogue with China. And the Chinese government continue to send the central delegation, Energy Bureau, big, Sinopec, CNPC, CNOOC, and all these bigger ones. They come, they ask questions. Gateway project with Enbridge from Edmonton to West Coast. They ask questions, how supportive is your government, federal government, to the Gateway project? And we tell them this is a private company's initiative based on commercialized market-oriented approach to build a pipeline. But they're asking persistently, we want to invest, we want to commit, but how much your federal government is really supporting this? It's very interesting that without political will somehow, without federal government support, they do not seem to engage even with the private sector, not to mention provincial government. I know Mr. Gary Marr in person, in his many capacities as minister before in the last Ralph Klein government, has assured the Chinese, so is the current government ministers, that we support Chinese investment and environmentally related cooperation projects on large scale, whether they're private or public investment in Alberta. And sometimes it doesn't really resonate. We have to tell them in North America, the resources, the energy, and it's a state and provincial jurisdiction. Somehow it still doesn't stick as much. We still need to work on that. I think the perception change on the Chinese side need to work. And the third challenge, I think, is, as we can see the presentations here, in what forms, if there are, assuming local to local linkages can happen, in what concrete forms you actually cooperate? Okay, the California seems to, from what you've been talking about, seem to be looking at very concrete energy efficiency on power plants and others. Alberta seems to be on a broader based transfer of some technologies, coal bed methane and other advanced oil extraction related efficiency technologies. But what other kind of forms of cooperation you can really come up to the table and to say this is to state to province, province to province, that we can actually do? Do you have an equal project? And who is paying for what? I think these are the kind of issues it really needs to be worked out. To what extent a provincial or a state government can commit certain amount of funding just for the sole purpose of saying we're linking up locally with a Chinese province or a city in some capacity. And we've been trying to work on that. I know the Alberta government is working on that. I mean, we have twinning relationship between Edmonton and Harbin for some well over 20 years. but we have not really made inroad into that kind of collaborative relationship on the environment. Even Harbin has, some 10 million people there. Could be very important to link up. We're still trying to find more. And so these are the kind of challenges I think really lying ahead and present some policy research options as well as considerations for the government, for the NGO, private sector, as well as academics. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Applause. Okay. I think Wenren actually really hit on, you maybe get why I actually tried to create this meeting. And I have to admit that initially when I went to look around the Canadians, I was trying to look at the federal government level, and I've actually noticed kind of not as much Canada action happening. And I did, then I happened to find Gary Mars, talked about. But I did discover that in British Columbia, I want to note that they said that they'll come and talk next year because they've been working in Guangdong for about 13 years. And just a few months ago, they signed an energy cooperation initiative. And actually, I forgot to tell Diane that they want to meet you. I think I have to introduce you because they're very interested in looking at California and finding out more about what Alberta's doing, because they want to really do some concrete. But I think that Wenren touched on it, that there aren't a lot of models out there. There's some city to city, like the Japanese actually in China. Shimonoseki does a lot of municipality working with energy management at the city level, and they're one of the few countries that I've seen that is doing actually concrete things. NRDC is unique as well because they've been doing concrete things for years, and I think just to praise it, we'll pretend he's not here, so we'll praise him so he won't be embarrassed. But in some ways, without NRDC, you guys wouldn't have done this, right? Okay, good. All right. Let's open it up to the audience so they can kind of what are they going to pay attention to us out here? We're the audience. We've been sitting so patiently. Helen's waving her arms around. Okay, Matianjay, can you hand it to Helen right there? And please say your name and affiliation.
Yes,
quickly.
I'm Helen Raffel. I'm with the Resources for the Future. And also, I taught environmental science at Sichuan University in Chengdu just a few years ago for a couple of years. And so let me make a comment first, quick comment, and then ask a bigger question. When I was in Sichuan province, we were aware of mild earthquakes going on in Yunnan province, and I'm old enough to have known for decades now that India is pushing up the Himalayas and that there's a big need for a readjustment of the tectonic plates, and all across South and Southeast Asia there are going to be huge earthquakes in the future. They're already overdue. So the idea of nuclear development in order to help Western China is absolutely a great shock, and I don't think that it should be encouraged at all. I can't imagine what kind of disaster would have occurred now in Sichuan province. But my question has to do with the fact that there are so many more science PhDs in China than in all of North America, as I understand it, and more being developed. So that I should think that rather than us just talking about giving technological information to China, there would be many opportunities, not only on the state-to-state level, but perhaps private scientific research organizations for developing technologies together. And I'm wondering what sort of work like that is going on, state, California to Jiangsu or whatever, Alberta, from the point of view of developing advanced technologies. You talked about capture and sequestration, and I know that that's still just in the bare beginnings of development, and I'm wondering what kind of sequestration could be happening in China, let alone in the United States, where they're so heavily populated and so forth. So my question has to do with technological development, two-way cooperation, not just us helping them to learn from us.
Let me maybe start with this, Helen, and this is a plug for the China Institute at the University of Alberta. The China Institute at the University of Alberta was funded initially by a rather large private gift of $37 million of Chinese antiquities that was matched by the provincial government of Alberta with the $37 million in cash. And I was the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs for the province of Alberta at the time and tried very hard to make that gift happen. it did happen, and the Institute is now up and running. And the purpose of the China Institute, of which Wen Ren is the acting director and of which I am the chair of the advisory committee for, is many-fold. Part of it is about trying to increase the amount of traditional study in the area of Asian history, languages, and so on. Part of it is about the exchange of students between the University of Alberta and Chinese universities. It's also about joint research opportunities between scholars in Alberta and those in China. And finally, it's also about sort of working business opportunities between Canadian businesses and working in China. I think on this point it's quite notable, an observation that I've made to those that want to do business in China is don't mistake China's desire to modernize its economy with its desire to westernize. And this is one of the important cultural learnings that I think that unsuccessful companies have come to. But maybe I'll turn it over to Wen Ren, and I don't know if he's familiar with any of the specific research opportunities that have happened in this particular area. I'm not familiar with it.
Just briefly, as Gary mentioned, we're extremely grateful that the provincial government of Alberta actually has a vision, partly due to Gary's push when he was minister of different capacities to invest, to have this China Institute. I left our part out because I know there are a lot of such private and university level academic activities going on. But we do have some very interesting programs going on. We have just, I think in the past 2 or 3 years, together with the Alberta government and China Institute, we put in like about $600,000 or $800,000 into collaboration with China on the environmental and energy efficiency area alone. That is particularly in the areas of your question. That is, we are the only university outside China which has signed a joint lab agreement with China's Ministry of Science and Technology. That is, the China's state labs under most Ministry of Science and Technology would have collaborative agreements with our leading labs at the University of Alberta, which has many environment and energy efficiency related research, leading academics. So what they identified, and together with us, all in the 5 areas, all related to energy efficiency and environment, like water, pollution related. And then we put in the 2 sides with the state labs and with our labs, and we have researchers coming together with the top of the cream in China and our research chairs to give them opportunities to actually collaborate. And we have just approved in a couple of months ago another $360,000 pouring into such collaborative projects. And with the money coming in, we're drawing a annual interest from the endowment about $1.5 to $1.8 million. And a chunk of that money we have identified and as focusing on energy efficiency and environment. And if we get the approval from the board, which is still working on the vision, and the new director is coming in this fall, it looks like that will stick. And I think that will be the basic direction we're going to move towards, that collaborative area. And many of the scientists on both sides have got involved.
And I think California's doing a few things.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. In Berkeley, California is the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and they have a specific China program headed up by Mark Levine. So anybody who's interested, you can just go on the website, and there's a whole level of exchange of information and working together. There also, when I was in Beijing, I spoke at the 4th International Green Building Conference, and a major co-host of that was UTC, United Technology Corporation, who's very, very committed to energy efficiency. They make a lot of money at it, which is great, and they have a specific institutional arrangement with if you tell me the name, I'll recognize the largest university, I believe, in Beijing. Yes, and they are specifically co-funded a center there where they're doing exchange of technical information and training targeted at some of the advanced energy efficiency technologies. And then the third area I'll just mention is that in the Bay Area in San Francisco, we have a very active Asia Society that is increasingly looking at energy and environment and climate change issues. And they are organizing, they had an exchange of scholars and business folks from China come to California last year, and they're now arranging to have business and academics and some policy leaders as well go over to Beijing and Shanghai later this year, trying to bring together the academic with the business side and basically the technology transfer aspect.
Also should note that in some ways there's actually another invisible panelist here that I think kind of linked to you guys. Actually, the Energy Foundation is in San Francisco. They put millions of more money into China for energy efficiency development than our DOE does, and they've been really the catalyst. I mean, they've supported NRDC, and a lot of research activities at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab even has been supported by the Energy Foundation. So there's actually their website is phenomenal because they support mainly like energy researchers and policy in China, and they are also in terms of thinking of this local to local, they have also over the last couple of years been moving to looking more at the provinces in China, and they could potentially be an important catalyst, I think, as time goes on to that. Some of the questions, comments here, I think it's Gwen.
Hi, Gwen Davidow from World Environment Center. First of all, Jennifer, thank you for doing this panel. I'm glad I skipped out of my other meeting to come here.
We're always better. We got better coffee and cookies.
Definitely. My question is, the background is that World Environment Center runs green supply chain programs, and we have one in Shanghai. And I've just come back from seeing some of the suppliers' manufacturing sites from the suppliers that participate in this program. And several of them mentioned that one of the barriers they experience, which is something Mr. Shen, you had mentioned, is the access to equipment. In other areas of the world where we've done this project or similar activities, we've worked also with mainly ministries of economy and environment in creating financing programs so that there is not just capital access to purchasing equipment that will help them become cleaner producers, but also some level of guidance into what type of equipment they might want. And you had mentioned that Jiangsu is actually has a program. The Jiangsu government has a program, I think, that helps finance some of the purchase of this equipment. I wonder if there are programs like that, financing programs in other provincial governments or at the central government level, and if so, how does one access those programs?
I don't think they have a particularly program currently in the central government. I'm not aware of any of that. And basically, right now, even in Jiangsu, is still is in the initial stage. Basically, the provincial government, the facility, the manufacturing, they apply for incentive, and the provincial government review. Basically, we're helping them to do the audit and to develop an assessment report, and then provide to the provincial government. And they, based on those criteria, and then they provide funding, how much they give out to the manufacturers, and then the manufacturer basically do their own because there is no the ESCO available, not the large scale. I mean, the really reliable energy service company provides service. So basically, what happens is that those manufacturers they spend money, they buy the equipment themselves in the market. And sometimes it's not available inside China. So it's sometimes hard. This is why we are working hard, try to streamline this process, try to help Jiangsu to develop an ethical market, like try to do the bigger project so that you can purchase the equipment in bulk volume, so that you can bring down the cost. So this is the whole kind of issue we're still working on. But right now, I'm not aware of any particular program that you can really take advantage of.
Let me interject real quick. Actually, the World Bank, a guy there, Robert Taylor, who's spoken here a couple of times, I don't know if you know him, he actually did help create the energy service companies in China. And he, I mean, it's funny, though, because I think in China, when he had some big numbers, but China's so big that there aren't, I mean, I think that it's probably in some areas it's had some impact. But, I mean, if you guys haven't connected with him, you definitely need to. But also same for World Environment Council, and we can hook you up. That it just, but again, it's kind of, the whole financing issue is dodgy. I mean, because to be honest, I can say this because you wouldn't want to say this, but that the central government doesn't trust local governments with these kinds of financing mechanisms. They don't have municipal financing. They don't have bonds. They're not allowed to have these kinds of things, and because the municipal governments or local governments haven't been, kind of been deemed responsible or accountable of these kinds of mechanisms yet. But they have to develop, because you're not going to get this kind of energy efficiency or green technology investment at the local level unless you have them. Diane, you had a...
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Some other questions or comments? How about right here in the middle, and then to this gentleman. So you can rattle over there first. Thank you.
Hi, Elisa Ferguson with the House Science and Technology Committee. There was some discussion about leveraging what we already know and activities that are going on, and I'm wondering if you know of any organizations that are keeping track of what various governments, either local, state, federal, are doing, what these best practices are. Is anyone coordinating that or serving as a clearinghouse? And if not, who should be?
Best practices on,
like your database, for instance. It might be energy efficiency. It might be, demonstrations of CCS. It might be, nuclear, something related to nuclear. It could be renewable energy. I mean, any energy topic.
I'll just do the energy efficiency, and otherwise my thought is somewhere within DOE or our national labs. The actual problem, my view is, it's not that there isn't information, there's so much information, figuring out where to go to get really trusted sort of best practices.
Well, that's my point. Should there be someone who is better coordinating that?
Yes.
And who should it be?
The new administration. I'm from California. I can say things like that.
Well, we agree, but...
Right. But that's one reason why we've decided we're going to put some of our California money behind what we hope will be a fabulous site on energy efficiency, and I have, in fact, had discussions, at the national level here, linking up with DOE and EPA, but trying to really, be a trusted source where the information is vetted on best practices on energy efficiency. I will say that there actually is the National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency that's co-sponsored by U.S. DOE and EPA that is putting out some very, very good documents, and one of the volumes is best practices, and now we're linking that up to China. So again, it's not having to reinvent the wheel. So that's sort of the energy efficiency side that, as I said, the National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency, I think, is doing a good job of vetting material. It's serious, good material. And then we are looking at our own website, and we're certain we're going to have links, around the country and around the world to other information. But we'd be happy to have somebody at the federal level step in and do it for us.
One thing I should note that the China Environment Forum, one thing that my predecessor started and then I picked up, and no foundation ever pays me to do this, but we do an inventory on U.S. government, international NGOs, and Chinese NGOs, and sometimes it's work that it's a big headache, 真的头痛. But and to be honest, I haven't done the U.S. federal government inventory in a while because nothing had really been changing. in the last couple of years. I mean, a lot of people in my network, and they're in the room here, the U.S. EPA, DOE folks who are doing work in China, the staff level. I mean, there's no funding, and and I keep track of these things. But I am going to be this summer. My assistant's going to go like, no, but we are going to do the U.S. government inventory again. And I think that I'm starting to see some gearing up, particularly in the area of climate change. And we do post these on our website, and so you can contact me. But it just and we also have, we gather, sometimes it's rather ad hoc, but we also are, trying to get information on what the Europeans are doing. I mean, in some ways, for specific questions, we tend to kind of know, and we're trying to find a way to institutionalize it, because I feel that information is really vital to know who does what. And when we inventory, we say who's doing the project, who's funding it, and what's going on, what's the impact. I mean, in some ways, my meetings here as well are also kind of like an inventory, an ongoing one too. So I just have to, not trying to plug my project, but just saying like, we do this because we aren't seeing anyone else kind of doing it. So anyone else have anything to add? Okay, some other question. Did you have another question amongst you three? Yeah, right next. Can you pass the mic, and then the gentleman up front here.
Thanks. I'm Adam Rosenberg, also with the House Science and Technology Committee. My question is for Mr. Marr. You had mentioned that the carbon intensity for oil from the tar sands had decreased by 45% since 1990. Do you have a sense of how its current carbon intensity compares with coal and natural gas without CCS?
We're working on that right now. The Alberta Energy Research Institute has just issued an RFP to sort of compare all of these things. It may fit in nicely, although with the work that's being done in California, but it might not be done in a timely way. I think in the state of California, they're trying to get that kind of information out by the end of the year. This work might not be done by then. So we're working on it. We're comparing it with, California heavy crudes and Venezuelan heavy crude, and with other things like coals to liquids and so on and so forth. So I don't have that comparison now, but it'll be available soon.
And we can hook you up. Okay, right here, Kimberly, gentleman in the blue. There, he's like, "Where's my mic? Where's my mic?" There it is. At long last, your patience paying off.
My name is Joe Dukert. I'm an independent energy analyst, and my question is to Commissioner Gruneich, and it's basically about transferability of policy approaches and technology. I will admit that I'm skeptical about California meeting the goals that you suggested by 2020 on reducing, as I think you said, rolling GWG emissions back to 1990 levels by 2020. Now, I think the nation can learn a lot from California, but California is a special case, and much of the low-hanging fruit must be gone by now. And when you say that you're going to count, and I had read this before, you're going to count imports, I think of the fact that California imports more energy than any other state in the nation. So I wonder if you could just describe in general terms how you expect to get from 2008 to 2020, the target, in very general terms, and in more specific terms, do you expect the curve of emissions to go down this way or go down that way and then drop? I'm trying to get my mind around the approach from here to 2020.
First of all, it's not just a goal; it is state law in California, and our view is. It certainly isn't going to be easy, but we have no choice. Under the state law, it is the Air Resources Board that is the agency charged with implementing it. So if you want more detailed information, you can go on their website, and there's lots and lots of information that it's one of the most intensive efforts going on in California right now, that the law permits but does not require use of a cap and trade mechanism. That is one of the areas that is being very, very extensively debated right now. Under the state law, by the end of this year, the Air Resources Board must formally adopt what is called the scoping plan. And for anyone who wants to know what California is up to, that is the place that will be what is the game plan, to answer your question. And I think the draft will be released in June. What our agency with the California Energy Commission is tasked with providing a recommendation to the Air Resources Board on how to treat the electricity and natural gas sector. And we formally adopted a decision last month that recommends that a couple of things. One is that all cost-effective energy efficiency be the foundation for California's effort on climate change. And I'm here to say I certainly hope that shows up in our federal legislation. The second thing is that when we look at the building blocks, we have 3 of them as part of our recommendation. The first is the existing programs that we have on energy efficiency and renewables, that we have a state law to get to 20% renewables. The second building block is expansion of those programs. And I won't go into all the details, but we are looking at going to 33% renewables. We can do more in energy efficiency. We can certainly do more in transportation. So that's sort of the command and control or regulatory programs, because certainly for energy efficiency, there's about 500 studies that show that markets don't develop energy efficiency on their own. And the worst mistake that anybody can make in dealing with climate change is to say, let's just set up cap and trade and assume energy efficiency is going to show up. And so because we have this mentality that energy efficiency, and certainly this is with the McKinsey report and everything else, that if you're going to have any economic hope on climate change, you've got to really think through how you're going to get the energy efficiency portion so that it helps generate the savings to pay for all the more expensive activities. So building block number 1 are the existing programs, support them, make them work. Building block number 2 is the expansion of programs. And then building block number 3, that is our recommendation, is cap and trade. That has not yet been formally accepted by the ARB, and that's going to be something that will be decided by the end of this year. And then I'll just end up by saying we're part of the Western Climate Initiative, and I think, is Alberta part of that, or an observer, which is the, come on in, which is the Western states, and maybe it's British Columbia. I know we've got 1 or 2 Canadian provinces that are looking at overall, and I think its focus is cap and trade, looking at setting up a cap and trade system in the Western states.
I'm going to leap in real quick because I actually want to, because I have the opportunity, him right here. NRDC, again, you can kind of tell I dig this NGO. But I mean, you know, the NRDC, that you're doing this work with California, and I was wondering if you could maybe say something about any other local initiatives that NRDC is involved in, or where you might see, you know, not like he's done with you guys yet, but where do you see, I mean, are you going to try to persuade these guys to move their program into other provinces, or a few words on that?
Sure.
Into the microphone.
Yes. Actually, we have been, it's a kind of success in Jiangsu, and we try to move on and try to build based on the success in Jiangsu and to scale up. So this year and beyond, we will continue work with California to do several other provinces like Hebei, Beijing, and Shanghai. That's all we are working on. We'll continue supported by Energy Foundation. We'll work on more provinces and to move this the success to expand this success to other provinces as well.
Do you think that, not to put you on the spot, but also maybe even wondering about with California, I mean, that, you know, the earthquake in Sichuan, I mean, I know that NRDC, that you guys have worked in Chongqing in the past. Do you think that, is there any way, I mean, thinking California, a lot of earthquake experience, is there any chance that that there could be some useful way, I mean, as Sichuan is rebuilding for a program like yours, or I don't know, I'm throwing you on the spot here. And basically anyone who comes and speaks at my meetings, I said this to the cement delegation last week, I'm like, okay, everyone, Sichuan province, move your things here, or even the Canadian, do you think there's any opportunities there?
I think the opportunities are unlimited. What we get down to is that for national governments, they typically have some amount of resources that are actually funded to do international work. It is very hard to convince our California legislature with our current budget that there should be funding of positions or time or resources from a state agency, and then certainly the same thing happens at the local government to be doing international work. And so this is something that everybody is struggling with, which is there is tremendous expertise, there's tremendous opportunities, and there's a great deal of interest at local levels and at many, many state levels. It's not just California. I've had discussions with other states that would welcome the opportunity to be involved, but it tends to be, what am I doing in my spare time? And there's, aside from foundation help, it's very hard to figure out how you can do it. And that's one reason why we've hooked onto, okay, if we set up a website that will clearly be useful in California, we can probably get any incremental funding from foundations, maybe from the national government, maybe some assistance from China to be able to expand it, and it's not that much more additional resources or time to make it useful.
Good point. Okay. Some other question or comment still lingering out in audience land here. Steve, did you have your hand up? So, yeah, here, get the mic to him, though, because we are indeed on webland.
Hello, my name is Stephen Andrews. I'm an independent environmental consultant. I'm interested in hearing more about two things. One, recent revisions to the access to information law in China that's happened this past May, and also the elevation of SEPA to the Ministry of Environmental Protection. And do you see this transferring into the realm of energy efficiency, and in what way?
I'll just start maybe with a brief response. Yes, I think the information opening up with better access is definitely helpful. It doesn't prevent the government from backtracking, as you can see what happened over the Tibetan crisis. But then now we see this unprecedented really openness for the media, both domestic and international, to cover the disaster relief of the earthquake. I think people on that front will still fight back and forth. I think the control would still be there in some ways. It's awful tempting for the Central Propaganda Department to use this opportunity and say, whoa, time to legitimate the Central Party and to see how efficient, how great they are. There is this temptation, but I think there is a larger social forces by the Chinese media themselves and Chinese public saying the best is to open up and let the foreign media access the information. And both Chinese and foreign media can then present a truthful picture of flow of information as what's happening in the past week or so. I think that momentum would be going back and forth. What I called China is going through a 2 steps forward momentum, while there is a future 1 step back moment will continue to have a possibility to occur. I think it happens in the same way on environmental and construction, corruption-related issues. On the SEPA, upgrade to a department level is absolutely important. As we see now, the energy efficiency and environmental management is being shared by the new Department of Energy, as well as the so-called State Energy Bureau, which doesn't really break away from the National Development and Reform Commission, but it's being upgraded from the original Energy Bureau within NDRC to a State Energy Bureau. It is now vice ministerial level, but within NDRC. So the two will have to share and to manage the energy efficiency as well as environmental profile. But I think structurally speaking, it's definitely a leap forward in addressing what China needs to do. But it doesn't mean the traditional fight between jurisdictions for those who advocate let's modernize first, fix the environment later. People will still be there. But I think the central leadership, at least who and when, has realized that you need to take care of the environment. This so-called concept of scientific development paradigm is really, I think, taking hold more and more with these kind of institutional changes.
Okay, I think that time has come up. Before you run off, I want to thank the speakers. Again, NGO, academic, and government folks. And thank the audience, and of course my funders, USAID, Waters Corporation, Rockefeller Brother Fund. Now those of you interested in local issues, Thursday, before you scurry off on vacation, we have a meeting called Coal City. And this is actually about a project it's supported by Western Kentucky University, a U.S. university, working in Anhui, in the city of Huainan, one of the most polluted cities, coal. It's like coal central, and working to try to help. One of the questions out there was like, what other areas could you work? This is different from what you guys are doing, looking at technology transfer on monitoring coal emissions. You know, I mean, I think that's a piece of what you do, but monitoring the emissions and looking at health impacts. And I think it's actually a perfect example of, again, this is the kind of project that could be picked up by, EPA region.